The notification came through at 2:47 a.m., waking me from the kind of sleep that doesn't quite qualify as rest. Unknown number. I almost dismissed it, finger hovering over the delete button, but something made me pause. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Is this Vivian Torres? This is Dale McConnell with Apex Bail Bonds. Your contact information was listed as emergency notification for Marcus Wellington. He's been arrested and is requesting release assistance. I read the message 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my consciousness like stones dropped into still water. Marcus. My Marcus. Except he hadn't been mine for 8 months now. 8 months since he'd decided that Sienna Pierce, with her family money and country club connections, was a better fit for his ascending trajectory, as he'd so eloquently put it when he ended things. I'd learned about the blocking through pure accident. A mutual friend, Taylor, had mentioned trying to send Marcus a message that included both of us. Weird, she'd said over coffee 3 months ago. It bounced back from your end. Are you sure you have the right number for him? That's when I'd understood. Not just blocked, systematically erased. Sienna had gone through his phone and eliminated me like malware from a computer system. Every photo, every message, every trace of our 4 years together. Gone. I should have felt satisfaction at his predicament. Instead, I felt the old familiar pull, the one that had kept me tethered to him through his networking dinners that ran until 3 a.m., his sudden need for a more sophisticated wardrobe that I'd paid for, his vague promises about paying me back when his investments came through. But I didn't respond to the bondsman. Not immediately. Instead, I rose from my bed in the modest apartment I'd moved to after selling the condo I'd bought while Marcus was still getting his business off the ground. I made coffee in the French press Marcus had once mocked as pretentious, and I sat at my kitchen table with the message glowing in the darkness like a beacon from a shipwreck. My phone rang at 3:15 a.m. Unknown number again, but this time a call. Miss Torres? Dale McConnell here. I sent you a message earlier about Marcus Wellington. I'm calling because, well, the situation is somewhat time-sensitive. His voice had the practiced calm of someone who dealt with crisis as a career. I imagined him in a small office somewhere, surrounded by case files and cold coffee, working the overnight shift because that's when people's carefully constructed lives tended to fall apart. I got your message, I said, my voice steady despite the caffeine tremors starting in my hands. I'm confused about why you're calling me, though. Marcus and I haven't been together in quite some time. I understand, Miss Torres. However, you're listed as his emergency contact in several official documents. His license, his business registration papers, his lease agreement. The individual currently with him? There was a delicate pause. Doesn't seem to be aware of the extent of his financial commitments. Sienna doesn't know he's broke. It wasn't a question. I couldn't possibly comment on that, ma'am, but what I can tell you is that Mr. Wellington is being held on charges related to investment fraud. The bail is set at $150,000. He's called the number he has for you multiple times, but apparently there's been no answer. Because she blocked me. The irony was almost poetic. Sienna had been so thorough in her elimination of me from Marcus's life that she'd inadvertently cut off his lifeline. What exactly are the charges? I asked, taking a sip of my coffee. It was too hot, scalding my tongue, but I welcomed the sensation. It kept me grounded. According to the arrest warrant, Mr. Wellington was operating an investment scheme promising guaranteed returns. Multiple complaints were filed. The SEC got involved. There's a paper trail going back about 2 years. 2 years. We'd still been together then. I'd been paying his rent, buying his clothes, funding his business lunches while he was setting up a Ponzi scheme. I appreciate the call, Mr. McConnell, but I don't think I can help. As I said, we're not together anymore. Of course, Miss Torres. I understand. Though I should mention, and this is purely informational, several of the documents linking your name to Mr. Wellington's financial activities were signed with your notarized permission. Business partnerships, loan guarantees, that sort of thing. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. What? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm sending over some PDFs now, just so you're aware of the full scope. Have a good morning, Miss Torres. The line went dead. 3 seconds later, my email pinged. I opened the attachments with shaking hands. There, in neat digital scans, was my signature. Over and over. On business formation documents for Wellington Investment Strategies. On loan applications for amounts that made my vision blur. On partnership agreements that made me legally responsible for debts I'd never known existed. My signature, my notarization, all official, all binding, all forged. I would have recognized my real signature anywhere. The way I looped the V in Vivian, the slight hesitation before the T in Torres. These signatures were good, professionally done, but not mine. And yet, they bore my notary stamp, my witness signatures, everything that would make them legally valid. The sun was rising by the time I'd read through all 37 pages. Marcus had built an empire of debt using my identity as the foundation, and now that empire was collapsing, and I was buried somewhere in the rubble. My phone buzzed again. Not Dale this time, a number I recognized despite the 8-month silence. Vivian, thank God. I know you're angry, but I need you to listen. Marcus's voice, that smooth baritone that had once convinced me to drain my savings account to fund his revolutionary investment opportunity. The same voice that had told me he loved me, while apparently planning to make me his financial scapegoat. How are you calling me? I asked calmly. I thought Sienna blocked my number. A pause. She doesn't know everything about my phone. I have a work line. Look, that's not important right now. Did that bondsman reach you? He did. Interesting reading, Marcus. All those documents with my signature. I can explain that. When you get me out, I'll explain everything. It was for us, Vivian. For our future. I was going to surprise you with the returns. Our future? Marcus, you broke up with me 8 months ago because I wasn't sophisticated enough for your new social circle. That was a mistake. I see that now. Sienna, she doesn't understand me like you do. She doesn't know about the real plan. Vivian, baby, you have to help me. This is all a misunderstanding. Once I get out, I can fix everything. I listened to him talk. Really listened. Probably for the first time in our entire relationship. I heard the desperation masquerading as confidence. I heard the manipulation dressed up as affection. I heard a man who had systematically destroyed my financial life calling me baby because he needed me to sign one more document, make one more sacrifice, save him one more time. No, I said simply. What? No. I'm not helping you, Marcus. I'm not signing anything. I'm not posting bail. I'm not riding to your rescue. Vivian, you don't understand. If you don't help me, they're going to come after you. Your name is on those documents. You're implicated in this. Documents you forged. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, his voice harder now. Those are legitimate business documents that you signed willingly. You were my partner. You knew what we were building. Interesting? Because I'm looking at them right now, and they're dated for days when I can prove I was out of state. Conferences, family visits. All documented, all time-stamped. I heard his breathing change. Vivian, don't do anything stupid. You testify against me. You go down too. That's how these things work. Maybe. Or maybe I call my own lawyer. The one I've already scheduled a meeting with this morning. The one who specializes in identity theft and fraud. You can't. Goodbye, Marcus. I ended the call and immediately blocked the number. Then I sat in the growing morning light, surrounded by evidence of my own gullibility, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the woman who saved him. Not this time. But I also wasn't going to be the woman he destroyed. The law office of Patricia Keene occupied the third floor of a building that had seen better days, but the woman herself was polished steel. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad that looked like it had survived several decades of client confessions. "How many times did you bail him out?" Patricia asked when I'd finished, her gray eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. "Financially? Or literally?" "Let's start with financially." I'd brought documentation, bank statements, loan receipts, rent payments. 4 years of systematic depletion of my savings account, all in the name of supporting Marcus's entrepreneurial journey. Patricia flipped through the pages with practiced efficiency. "And you have nothing in writing? No promissory notes? No partnership agreements?" "He said that was for corporations and lawyers, that we were building something based on trust." "Of course he did." She set down the papers. "Here's your situation, Ms. Torres. Those forged documents he created make you look like a willing participant in his scheme. Prosecutors love co-conspirators. It makes their job easier. But I can prove I didn't sign them." "Can you?" "Forensic document analysis is expensive and not always conclusive. And even if you can prove forgery, you still have a problem. You gave this man money repeatedly, supported his lifestyle, paid his bills. Any prosecutor worth their salt will argue you knew exactly what he was doing and you were a willing participant." I felt the walls of the small office closing in. "So what do I do?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "We have a few options. None of them are pleasant. Option 1. You cooperate with the investigation, provide all the documentation you have showing your financial contributions were loans and support, not investment in his scheme. You testify about the forgeries. You potentially face some financial penalties but likely avoid jail time." And option 2? You go on the offensive. You file charges against him for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. You beat them to the punch. You control the narrative. Can I do that? If I'm implicated in his scheme? You can if you act fast and if your story is airtight. But Ms. Torres, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I met her gaze. "Okay. Did you know? Even a little bit? Did you suspect what he was doing?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about the expensive dinners Marcus could suddenly afford, the new car, the way he'd started dressing better, acting more confident. I'd thought it was success, finally arriving after years of struggle. But had I known? Had I chosen not to see? "I suspected he was cheating on me," I said finally. "I suspected he was using me for money. But this? An actual criminal enterprise? No, I didn't know that." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then we go with option 2. We file first, we file fast, and we make you the victim, not the accomplice. Because that's what you are, Ms. Torres. You're a victim. And it's time Marcus Wellington learned that victims can fight back." By noon, I'd signed more legal documents than I had in my entire life. By 2 p.m., criminal complaints had been filed with both local police and federal authorities. By 5 p.m., my story was documented, notarized, and submitted to the SEC investigator handling Marcus's case. And by 7 p.m., my phone started ringing. The first call was from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice dripped with barely controlled rage. "You selfish bitch. Excuse me? This is Sienna. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to back off. Marcus made a mistake getting involved with you, and now you're trying to destroy his life because he moved on. I should have hung up. Patricia had warned me not to engage with anyone connected to Marcus's case, but something in Sienna's voice, the absolute certainty of her righteousness, ignited something in me. Sienna, the woman who blocked my number on Marcus's phone, how did you get mine? That's not important. What's important is that you're lying about Marcus to save yourself. Everyone knows you were his business partner. Everyone knows you were in on the investment strategy. And now that it's not working out, you're throwing him under the bus. The investment strategy that was actually a Ponzi scheme? It wasn't. It was legitimate business. You just didn't understand the complexity of what he was building. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Sienna, how much money have you given Marcus? Silence. Because I gave him everything. I paid his rent for 2 years. I bought his clothes. I funded his business lunches where he was probably whining and dining you. I depleted my savings, my retirement account, everything. And then he left me for someone with actual money. For you. So forgive me if I don't feel particularly charitable about the fact that he forged my signature on federal documents to commit fraud. You're lying. Marcus wouldn't what? Use people? Manipulate them? Sienna, let me ask you something. Has he borrowed money from you yet? Or is he still in the investment phase, where he's showing you the lifestyle he can't actually afford? The pause was longer this time. He said he had some temporary cash flow issues, that his accounts were tied up in investments. But it's temporary. He's expecting a major payout next month. Of course he is. He's always expecting a major payout next month. That's how this works. And when next month comes and there's no payout, there will be another reason, another excuse, another temporary problem that needs just a little bit more of your money to solve. You're bitter and jealous and I'm free, I interrupted. For the first time in 4 years, I'm free of Marcus Wellington and his schemes. And if you're smart, you'll get free too. Before he forges your signature on something that lands you in federal prison. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like power. The second call came an hour later. This time, I recognized the number. My mother. Vivian, honey, what's going on? I just got a very strange call from a lawyer saying they might need to speak with me about Marcus. I closed my eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have called you first. I explained everything. The schemes, the forgeries, the legal action I'd taken. My mother listened in the way she always had, without judgment, without interruption, letting me empty out all the poison I'd been carrying. Why didn't you tell me? She asked when I'd finished. About the money? About what he was doing to you? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I could fix it. Because I thought if I just supported him enough, believed in him enough, he'd become the person he kept promising he'd be. Oh, honey, you can't love someone into being better. They have to want it themselves. I know that now. So what happens next? I fight. I clear my name. And I make sure Marcus can't do this to anyone else. Good girl. You need any help? Not yet, but I might. Is that okay? Vivian, you're my daughter. Of course it's okay. You call me day or night, you hear me? We said our goodbyes. And I sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the debris of my old life, and I felt something shift. For 4 years I'd been trying to prove I was worthy of Marcus's love. I'd been trying to be enough, give enough, sacrifice enough. And now, finally, I was trying to be enough for myself. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations, document reviews, and detective interviews. The SEC investigator, A woman named Chen, who had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many schemes, seemed initially skeptical of my story. "You understand how this looks," she said during our second meeting. "Woman funds boyfriend's lifestyle for years, suddenly claims she knew nothing when he gets caught. I understand, but I have documentation. Every loan, every payment, it's all tracked. And I have proof I wasn't present for the document signings. Forgery is difficult to prove. Then prove the Ponzi scheme," I said, surprising myself with my directness. "Follow the money. Look at what Marcus was promising versus what he was actually doing. Look at the investors who lost money. I'm not one of them. I was never an investor. I was a piggy bank." Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Interest, maybe. Or recognition. "Walk me through a typical week when you were together," she said, pulling out a fresh notepad. "I want to understand the daily dynamic." So I did. I told her about Marcus's routine, how he'd leave for client meetings in the mornings, always impeccably dressed in clothes I'd paid for, how he'd come home talking about deals and opportunities, numbers that sounded impressive but never quite materialized into actual income, how he'd need just a little more to close the next big account. "Did you ever meet any of these clients?" "No." He said it wasn't appropriate, that I didn't have the business background to understand the conversations. "But you have a degree in finance." I looked up, startled. Chen smiled slightly. "Ms. Torres, I do my homework. You graduated summa cum laude from Berkeley. You worked for Schwab for 3 years before going freelance. You're a certified financial planner. You're not some naive girlfriend who doesn't understand money. Then why did you fall for it?" Chen finished. "Because that's what people like Marcus Wellington do. They find smart, capable people and they make them doubt themselves. They chip away at confidence, at boundaries, at common sense. They make you think that believing them is the same thing as believing in yourself." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I should have known better. "Yes, you should have, but should have doesn't commit fraud. Marcus Wellington did. And now we're going to prove it." She spent the next 4 hours going through my documentation with a precision that was almost surgical. Every bank statement, every text message, every email that showed Marcus requesting money, promising repayment, deflecting questions about his business. "This is good," Chen said finally. "This is very good. You've got a clear pattern of financial abuse, and not a single piece of evidence suggesting you were involved in or aware of his scheme. So I'm clear?" "Not quite, but you're in a much better position than you were 3 days ago. Here's what's going to happen next. We're going to cross-reference your documentation with the timeline of Marcus's investor fraud. We're going to show that the money you gave him went to fund his personal lifestyle, not his business operations. And we're going to prove that he systematically isolated you from the actual mechanics of his scheme while using your credentials to create legitimacy." "My credentials? Financial planner girlfriend? That's gold for a con man. He could tell investors you'd reviewed his strategy, that a professional had vetted his approach. Whether you actually did or not becomes irrelevant. The implication is enough." I thought about all the times Marcus had mentioned me at his business dinners, the ones I was never invited to. "My girlfriend's in finance," I'd heard him say once when I'd called during one of these events. "She's really impressed with the model." I'd felt proud in that moment. He was acknowledging me, valuing my expertise. He'd been using me as a prop. "I want to help," I told Chen. "Whatever you need, whatever I can do to make sure he doesn't do this to anyone else." "Good, because we're going to need you to testify. And Ms. Torres, I have to warn you, it's not going to be pleasant. Marcus's lawyers will try to paint you as a scorned ex-girlfriend out for revenge. They'll dig into your relationship, your finances, your personal life. They'll try to make you look foolish for believing him. Let them try, I said, and I meant it. I was foolish. I did believe him. But being foolish isn't a crime. Fraud is. Chen nodded approvingly. Work with Patricia to prepare your testimony. Document everything, no matter how small it seems. Every lie he told, every promise he broke, every time he manipulated you. We're building a case about a pattern of behavior, and you're a key witness to that pattern. As I left the federal building that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're making a big mistake. Last chance to fix this before you regret it. I showed it to Patricia when we met later that evening. She read it twice, then looked up at me. Forward this to Detective Chen immediately, and don't respond. You think it's Marcus? Probably. Or someone working for him. Either way, it's witness intimidation and it's illegal. Add it to the pile of charges. I did as she instructed, then sat back in her office chair. How did my life become a crime drama? You fell in love with the wrong person. It happens to smart people every day. Patricia closed her laptop and looked at me seriously. But here's what I want you to understand, Vivian. This isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning of your comeback. A year from now, 5 years from now, you're going to look back at this moment as the time you took your life back. I don't feel like I'm taking anything back. I feel like I'm barely holding on. That's because you're in the middle of it. But trust me, I've seen this play out hundreds of times. The ones who fight, the ones who refuse to be victims, they're the ones who come out stronger. I wanted to believe her. But sitting in that office, with the weight of federal charges and forged documents, and a imploded relationship pressing down on me, strength felt like a distant country I'd never reach. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the warning signs I'd missed. The time Marcus had asked me to co-sign a lease and then never added my name to the rental agreement. The way he'd always insisted on handling all the financial paperwork for our future business. The expensive gifts he'd given me early in our relationship, before I'd started funding his lifestyle, gifts I now realized must have been bought with other people's money. At 3 a.m., I got up and made tea. Chamomile, which Marcus had always hated. Smells like an old lady's perfume, he'd said. So I'd stopped drinking it, added it to the list of small compromises that had slowly eroded who I was. I was sipping my old lady tea and staring at the city lights through my window when my phone rang. Dale McConnell, the bail bondsman. Ms. Torres, sorry to call so late. Or early, I suppose. It's fine, I wasn't sleeping anyway. I wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus Wellington made bail. I set down my tea carefully. How? I thought he couldn't afford it. He couldn't. But his girlfriend posted it. Sienna Pierce. Came in with a cashier's check for the full amount. She posted a $150,000 bail? Actually, with our fee structure, she paid $15,000 cash and put up her condo as collateral for the rest. Seemed pretty determined. I thought about my conversation with Sienna, how she'd accused me of lying, of trying to destroy Marcus out of jealousy. Apparently, she'd decided to prove her loyalty the only way Marcus understood, with money. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. Marcus tried to leave a message for you through our office. I told him I couldn't guarantee delivery, but he insisted I try. What did he say? Dale cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Tell her the offer still stands. She knows what I mean. I did know what he meant. Before everything imploded, Marcus had mentioned a business opportunity. $5,000, Vivian. That's all I need to close this deal, and then we're both set for life. Partners, like we always talked about. It had been the last time he'd asked me for money, just 2 weeks before he'd broken up with me for Sienna. I'd said no. My savings were finally depleted, and I'd started to realize that set for life was a horizon that kept receding every time we got close. Now, He was offering me the same deal. One more chance to be his partner, to share in his mythical success. All I had to do was recant my statement, drop my charges, and pretend the forgeries never happened. Mr. McConnell, if Marcus calls again, please tell him I'm not interested in any offers. Tell him to have his lawyer contact mine. Yes, ma'am. And Ms. Torres? For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of Marcus Wellingtons. They all have the same pattern. They're real good at making people feel special right up until they need the next person. You did the right thing. After he hung up, I sat with those words. You did the right thing. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it just felt heavy. Because doing the right thing meant testifying against someone I'd loved. It meant airing my stupidity in a federal courtroom. It meant facing down Marcus's lawyers, his lies, his manipulation, all over again. It meant being strong when I still felt broken. My phone buzzed with an email. Subject line: Preliminary Witness List, U.S. v. Wellington. I opened it, expecting to see my name. What I didn't expect was to see 43 other names. 43 other people Marcus had allegedly defrauded. I click through to the attached document. The first name on the list: Sharon Wellington, Marcus's mother. He'd stolen from his own mother. I kept reading. Teachers, retirees, a veteran on disability, people who'd trusted Marcus with their savings, their retirement funds, their children's college money, people who'd believed his promises of guaranteed returns and secure investments, people like me, except they'd lost actual money to his scheme instead of just funding his lifestyle. At the bottom of the email, a note from Detective Chen. Thought you should see this. You're not alone in this, Vivian. And you're not the one who should feel ashamed. I read through all 43 names, all 43 victim statements. Stories of trust betrayed, futures destroyed, security stolen. And I realized something. This was bigger than my broken heart. This was bigger than my depleted savings account or my forged signatures or my humiliation. This was about making sure Marcus couldn't do this to number 44. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not for the lawyers or the detectives or the prosecutors. For me. I wrote about every red flag I'd ignored, every boundary I'd let him cross, every time I'd chosen to believe him over my own instincts. I wrote until the sun came up. And when I finished, I had a 10,000-word document detailing every manipulation, every lie, every tactic Marcus had used to control me and access my resources. Then I sent it to Patricia with a simple subject line. Everything. She called me 20 minutes later. Vivian, this is incredible. This is beyond what I expected. You've documented psychological abuse, financial abuse, coercive control. This isn't just fraud testimony. This is a roadmap of how predators operate. Can you use it? Can I use it? Vivian, this is going to be the cornerstone of your testimony. You're not just a witness anymore. You're an expert on Marcus Wellington's methodology, and that makes you incredibly valuable to this case. After we hung up, I sat in the morning light streaming through my windows and I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Hope. Not the desperate hope of thinking Marcus would change, or the foolish hope that I could love him into being better. This was different. This was the hope that comes from finally telling the truth, even when the truth makes you look stupid. Especially when the truth makes you look stupid. Because smart people fall for con artists, too. Successful people get manipulated. Strong people find themselves in abusive relationships. And the only way to break the pattern is to tell the story. My phone rang. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ms. Torres, this is Janet Reeves. I'm one of the other victims in the Wellington case. Detective Chen gave me your information. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Of course. How can I help you? Her voice cracked. I just needed to talk to someone who understands. Everyone keeps asking me how I could have fallen for it, how I didn't see it coming. And I don't have a good answer except that he was so convincing. He made me feel special. He made me feel like we were partners. I closed my eyes, hearing my own story in her words. You don't need to explain, I said softly. I understand exactly what you mean. You do? Janet. I funded his entire lifestyle for 4 years. I paid his rent, bought his clothes, gave him money for business expenses that apparently went straight into his scheme. And I did it because he made me believe I was investing in our future, in us. So trust me, I understand. She was crying now. I gave him my late husband's life insurance, $80,000. It was supposed to be for my retirement, and now it's gone. My heart broke for her, for me, for all 43 names on that list. It's not gone, I said firmly. The SEC is tracking every dollar. They're going to recover as much as they can. And more importantly, we're going to make sure Marcus pays for what he did. But that only happens if we all stand together. I'm scared to testify. His lawyers are already calling, trying to make deals. Don't talk to his lawyers. Only talk to your own lawyer and to Detective Chen. And Janet, you're not alone in this. None of us are. We're going to face him together. We talked for another hour, sharing stories, swapping warning signs we'd missed, building a strange sort of solidarity in our shared victimhood. When we finally hung up, I felt lighter somehow. Patricia had been right. This wasn't the end of my story. This was my comeback. And it started with 3 simple words I'd been too afraid to say for 4 years. No more, Marcus. I said them out loud to my empty apartment, and they echoed back like a promise. No more manipulation, no more excuses, no more sacrificing myself for someone who'd never valued the gift. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Deposition scheduled for next week. Are you ready? I looked around my small apartment, at the life I'd built after Marcus left. It wasn't much, just a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, furnished with things I'd bought myself, decorated in colors I actually liked, instead of colors that showed better for his business contacts. But it was mine. All mine. No lies, no schemes, no empty promises. I'm ready, I texted back. And for the first time in 8 months, I actually believed it. The deposition room was smaller than I'd imagined. Corporate gray walls, a long table, and Marcus sitting across from me with 2 lawyers flanking him like bodyguards. He'd lost weight. His tailored suit, probably the last one I'd paid for, hung loose on his frame. Our eyes met for the first time in 8 months. I waited for the familiar flutter in my chest, the old pull of attraction and hope. Nothing came. He was just a stranger who'd stolen my signature. Ms. Torres, Marcus's lead attorney began, a sharp-featured woman named Carlyle. You claim you had no knowledge of Mr. Wellington's business operations, is that correct? That's correct. Yet you lived with him for 3 years. You were intimate partners. You funded his lifestyle by your own admission. And you expect us to believe you never once asked what he was doing with the money? Patricia had prepared me for this. I asked constantly. He told me he was building an investment consulting business. He showed me presentations, business cards, client testimonials. Everything appeared legitimate. Appeared legitimate, Carlyle repeated, making notes. But you're a certified financial planner, Ms. Torres. Surely you reviewed his business model. He told me the details were proprietary, that showing me would violate his client's confidentiality agreements. And you accepted that? I took a breath. Yes. Because I trusted him. Because that's what you do in a relationship. You trust your partner. Marcus shifted in his seat. I kept my eyes on Carlyle. Let's talk about these signatures, she continued. sliding documents across the table. These partnership agreements, loan applications. You're claiming these aren't your signatures? They're forgeries. I can prove I wasn't present when they were allegedly signed. I have travel records, conference attendance logs, credit card statements showing I was in different cities on those dates. Or, Carlyle said smoothly, you signed them in advance, knowing Mr. Wellington would need them, and you're now claiming forgery to avoid prosecution. Why would I do that? Because hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, Ms. Torres. Mr. Wellington ended your relationship. You were upset. You saw an opportunity for revenge when his business encountered difficulties. I felt Patricia's hand on my arm, a subtle warning to stay calm. Marcus didn't end our relationship because of business difficulties. He left me for someone with more money, someone who could fund his lifestyle when I finally ran out of resources. That's your interpretation. It's documented fact. He started dating Sienna Pierce 3 weeks before he broke up with me. Sienna, who has a trust fund and owns a condo worth $1.2 million. I have credit card receipts showing Marcus taking her to restaurants he claimed he couldn't afford when we were together. Carlyle's expression didn't change, but I saw Marcus flinch. Let's discuss your financial contributions, she pivoted. Over 4 years, you gave Mr. Wellington approximately $180,000. That seems excessive for someone who claims they were merely supporting a struggling entrepreneur. It does seem excessive, I agreed. In hindsight, it seems insane. But that's how financial abuse works. It starts small, a few hundred for rent when he's short. Then it's business expenses, networking dinners, professional development. Each request is reasonable on its own. It's only when you step back and add it all up that you realize you've been systematically drained. Or you were investing in a business you believed in. If I was investing, I would have demanded equity, partnership agreements, profit-sharing terms. I'm a financial planner. I know how investments work. These were loans, gifts, support, not investments. Do you have documentation of these loan terms? No, because Marcus said formal agreements would complicate things when we eventually got married. Ah, yes, marriage. Were you engaged, Ms. Torres? I hesitated. Not officially. But you expected to be? He talked about our future together, our plans, what we'd do when his business took off. So you gave him money based on promises of a future together. And when that future didn't materialize, you decided he owed you, that he'd defrauded you. No, I said firmly. I decided he'd defrauded me when I saw my forged signature on federal documents used to steal money from 43 other people. That's when I realized Marcus wasn't just a bad boyfriend, he was a criminal. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice quiet. Vivian, it doesn't have to be like this. Mr. Wellington, Patricia cut in sharply. Direct communication with my client isn't appropriate. I just want her to understand. Your client can communicate through counsel, Patricia continued. Ms. Torres has nothing to say to Mr. Wellington directly. But Marcus was looking at me now, his eyes full of that old intensity. Remember what we talked about? The opportunity? It's still there, Viv. We could still make this work. And there it was. Even now, facing federal charges, his life imploding, he was still running a con. Still believing he could manipulate me with promises and pet names and the ghost of what we'd been. Mr. Wellington, I said calmly, the only thing I want from you is my $180,000 back, my forged signatures removed from federal documents, and to never hear your voice again. His expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No, the mistake was believing you in the first place. The deposition lasted 6 hours. By the end, my voice was hoarse and my head was pounding, but I'd held firm on every point. Carlyle had tried every angle, scorned lover, willing accomplice, gold digger, and I'd countered with documentation, timelines, and the simple truth. Marcus had used me, and when I was no longer useful, he'd discarded me and moved on to his next mark. Patricia was triumphant as we left the building. You were perfect. Calm, consistent, unshakable. Carlisle threw everything at you and you didn't break. I didn't feel unshakable. That's what made you credible. You were honest about your mistakes. You didn't try to paint yourself as some innocent victim who couldn't have possibly known better. You admitted you should have seen the warning signs, that you were foolish to trust him. That kind of honesty is powerful. What happens now? Now we wait. The prosecution will review your deposition along with everyone else's. They'll build their case, and eventually, this goes to trial. How long? Could be months, could be a year. Federal cases move slowly, but Vivian, I want you to start thinking about something else. What? Your recovery. Not just legally, financially and emotionally. You need to rebuild your life. Get back to work, reconnect with friends, remember who you were before Marcus. She was right, but the task felt overwhelming. How do you rebuild a life when the last 4 years were a lie? The call from Janet came 2 days later. Have you seen the news? What news? Turn on Channel 7. They're covering Marcus's case. And Vivian, there's something else. I switched on the TV. Marcus's photo filled the screen, the same professional headshot he'd used for his fake investment business. The headline read, "Local investment advisor charged with defrauding dozens." The reporter's voice was crisp. Marcus Wellington, 34, has been charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, investment fraud, and identity theft. According to prosecutors, Wellington operated a Ponzi scheme for over 2 years, promising guaranteed returns while using new investor money to pay earlier investors. But there's a twist. Prosecutors say Wellington's primary victim may have been his girlfriend, whose identity he allegedly stole to create legitimacy for his scheme. They showed my name on screen. My photo. Some old LinkedIn profile picture I'd forgotten about. Vivian Torres, a certified financial planner, was in a relationship with Wellington for 4 years. Prosecutors say Wellington forged her signature on numerous documents and used her professional credentials to gain investor trust. Torres is cooperating with investigators and has filed separate charges against Wellington for identity theft. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, one after another. I let them all go to voicemail. "They're making you sound like a hero," Janet said. "Like you're the one who exposed him." "I'm not a hero. I'm just trying to protect myself." "Maybe, but for those of us who lost money, you're the one who stood up first. You're the one who filed charges and fought back. That matters." After we hung up, I listened to the voicemails. 3 were from reporters requesting interviews. One was from a victims advocate organization asking if I'd be willing to speak at a conference about financial abuse. One was from my former employer at Schwab, asking if I'd consider returning to work. And one was from Sienna. "I need to talk to you." Her voice was shaking. "Please, it's important." I debated deleting it. She'd called me names, defended Marcus, posted his bail with her condo as collateral. Why would I help her now? But something in her voice reminded me of myself 8 months ago. Scared. Confused. Starting to see the truth but not wanting to believe it. I called her back. "Thank you," she said immediately. "I wasn't sure you would." "What do you want, Sienna?" "I want to know if it's true. All of it. Because Marcus says you're lying, that you're trying to frame him because he left you." But then I started looking at our finances, and... She stopped, her breath catching. "And what?" "He's been taking money from my accounts. Small amounts at first, but it's been increasing. And there are credit cards I didn't open, charges I didn't make. Vivian, I think he's doing to me what he did to you." I closed my eyes. How much? Maybe $30,000 so far. But my condo, the one I used for his bail, he's been talking about selling it. Says we need to liquidate assets before the trial, that it's smart financial planning. Sienna, listen to me very carefully. Go to your bank right now, today. Close any accounts Marcus has access to. Change all your passwords. And call a lawyer. But the bail, if I pull the collateral, he goes back to jail. He should be in jail. He's a criminal. And he's going to take everything you have if you don't stop him now. Silence on the line. Then quietly. I thought he loved me. I thought the same thing. For 4 years. And I was wrong. We both were. I'm sorry. For what I said to you. For blocking your number. For everything. You tried to warn me and I didn't listen. You weren't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to see it for a long time either. But Sienna, you need to protect yourself now, before it's too late. Will you help me? I don't know who else to ask. I should have said no. She'd been awful to me, had chosen Marcus over common sense. But I remembered Janet's words about me standing up first, about mattering to the other victims. Maybe this was part of my recovery. Not just saving myself, but helping others escape the same trap. I'll send you my lawyer's information. Tell Patricia I referred you. She'll know what to do. The trial was set for 8 months later. In that time, my life slowly began to reassemble itself. I returned to work at Schwab, taking a position in their fraud prevention department. A job that made perfect sense, given my recent education in how financial schemes operate. I started therapy, unpacking not just Marcus but the patterns that had made me vulnerable to him. The need to be needed, the tendency to measure my worth by how much I could give, the fear that being successful made me unlovable unless I could prove I was still nice by sacrificing myself. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the Marcus years. They welcomed me back without judgment, though a few admitted they'd been worried about me. You changed, my friend Taylor told me over coffee. You were always checking your phone, always stressed about money. You stopped doing the things you loved. We tried to say something, but you got defensive. I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just promise you'll never let someone dim your light like that again. I promised. Sienna became an unexpected ally. After pulling her bail collateral and watching Marcus get rearrested, she'd provided investigators with additional evidence of his fraud. Unauthorized credit cards, forged checks, a second phone where he'd been running additional schemes she'd known nothing about. I found messages to other women, she told me during one of our increasingly regular coffee meetings. Not romantic ones. Investment pitches. He was running the same game on at least 5 other people simultaneously. Did you tell Detective Chen? I gave her everything. His laptop, his phones, bank statements. I want him to pay for what he did to all of us. We'd formed a strange friendship, bonded by shared victimhood and the determination to never be victims again. She'd started a support group for people who'd been financially abused by romantic partners. I'd spoken at the first meeting, sharing my story, watching recognition dawn on faces around the room. We weren't alone. There were hundreds of us, maybe thousands. Smart, successful people who'd been manipulated by someone they loved. The trial began on a Tuesday in April. The courtroom was packed. Victims, press, curious onlookers. Marcus sat at the defense table in a cheaper suit this time, his confidence visibly shaken. I was the prosecution's star witness, 3 days on the stand, walking the jury through every manipulation, every forged document, every lie. Carlisle cross-examined me aggressively, but Patricia had prepared me well. You gave him money willingly, Carlisle pressed. I did. But I didn't willingly allow him to forge my signature on federal documents used to commit fraud. You benefited from his lifestyle. I paid for his lifestyle, Every dinner, every suit, every car payment. The only thing Marcus contributed was promises. The most powerful moment came when the prosecution presented phone records showing Marcus had called me 17 times from jail, all blocked by Sienna's interference with his phone. The irony wasn't lost on the jury. Mr. Wellington had systematically erased Ms. E.I. Torres from his phone to please his new girlfriend, the prosecutor explained. But when he needed help, when he needed someone to bail him out, she was still his emergency contact everywhere that mattered. Because Marcus Wellington is very good at taking from people, he just forgets that people notice eventually. Janet testified about her husband's life insurance. A retired teacher explained how she'd lost her pension. Marcus's own mother took the stand, crying as she described how her son had stolen $50,000 from her. The defense tried to paint Marcus as a misguided entrepreneur whose business had failed, not a criminal. But the evidence was overwhelming. 43 victims, over $2 million in losses, years of deliberate deception. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. I sat in the gallery with Janet, Sienna, and a dozen other victims. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s, who'd clearly seen too many Marcus Wellingtons. "Mr. Wellington," she began, "you are a predator. You identify vulnerable people, and you exploit their trust for personal gain. You used your own girlfriend's identity to commit fraud. You stole from your own mother. You destroyed people's retirements, their savings, their faith in humanity." Marcus's lawyer tried to interject, citing his client's remorse and potential for rehabilitation. The judge cut him off. "Mr. Wellington has shown no genuine remorse. Even during this trial, he attempted to manipulate witnesses and blame victims for his crimes. The only thing he regrets is getting caught." She sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to all victims. As the marshals led Marcus away, he looked back at me one last time. I waited for some final manipulation, some last attempt to make me feel guilty or responsible. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes: defeat. Marcus Wellington had finally run out of marks. The restitution came slowly. Marcus had hidden assets in various accounts, and investigators spent months tracking down every dollar. I eventually recovered $47,000, not even a quarter of what I'd given him, but more than I'd expected. I used it to fund a scholarship at my alma mater for women studying finance, the Vivian Torres Scholarship for Financial Literacy. If I could help even one woman recognize the warning signs of financial abuse, maybe the whole nightmare would have meaning. The real recovery took longer. Learning to trust again. Learning that being successful didn't make me unlovable. Learning that the right person wouldn't ask me to diminish myself to make them feel bigger. I dated eventually. Carefully at first, hyper-vigilant for red flags. But slowly, I learned that most people weren't Marcus. Most people were honest, decent, capable of real partnership instead of parasitic extraction. A year after the trial, I was promoted to senior fraud analyst at Schwab. My expertise, hard-won through personal disaster, made me excellent at my job. I could spot financial manipulation patterns that others missed because I'd lived through them. Janet invited me to her daughter's wedding. Sienna started a nonprofit helping fraud victims navigate the legal system. The teacher whose pension Marcus had stolen sent me Christmas cards with photos of her grandchildren, thanking me for fighting back. And Marcus? Marcus served his time in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. I never visited, never wrote, never thought about him, except when my work required me to identify similar predatory patterns. He was my past, but he was also my catalyst. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters. Sometimes you have to fall for the wrong person to recognize the right one. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can build something real. 3 years after that 2:47 a.m. text from the bail bondsman, I received a letter. Prison return address. Marcus. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Vivian, it began. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was wrong, but I want you to know that being in here has given me time to think about everything. About how I treated you, how I used you. You were the best thing in my life, and I destroyed it. I'm sorry. It continued for 3 pages. Apologies, explanations, requests for understanding. The same manipulation dressed up as rehabilitation. At the end, I get out in 9 years. Maybe we could talk then? Maybe start over? I've changed, Vivian, I promise. I read it twice. Then I pulled out my shredder and watched Marcus's promises disappear into confetti. Some people never change. They just get better at pretending. But I had changed. I'd become someone who recognized manipulation, who valued herself, who understood that love shouldn't cost everything. I'd become someone who could see a con coming from miles away, and most importantly, I'd become someone who could say no to bad relationships, to false promises, to anyone who tried to make me smaller to make themselves bigger. That night, I went to dinner with friends. Real friends. The kind who'd stuck by me through the Marcus years even when I'd pushed them away. We laughed, we talked. We split the check evenly because that's what actual partners do. Walking home under city lights, I thought about that bail bondsman finding my number when Marcus's girlfriend had tried to erase me. I thought about how Marcus had blocked me everywhere, but kept me as his emergency contact, his backup plan, his safety net. He'd thought he was smart, keeping me tethered while moving on to better prospects. But he'd forgotten something crucial. Safety nets are only useful when you're falling, and I'd learned to fly without him. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Torres, this is Michelle Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We're investigating a case that has similarities to the Wellington prosecution. Would you be willing to consult? I smiled and typed back. When do you need me? Because that's who I was now. Not Marcus Wellington's victim. Not the woman who'd been stupid enough to fall for a con artist. I was the woman who'd fought back, stood up, and won. I was the expert who could help others see what I'd learned too late. I was enough, all by myself. Without diminishing, without sacrificing, without proving my worth through depletion. Marcus had tried to destroy me with his schemes. Instead, he'd accidentally shown me my own strength, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not his prison sentence, not the restitution, not even the satisfaction of watching his empire of lies crumble. The revenge was becoming someone who would never fall for someone like him again. The revenge was surviving. The revenge was thriving. The revenge was knowing that while Marcus sat in a cell counting down 9 more years, I was out here living a life he could never touch, never diminish, never steal. He'd blocked my number and kept me as his emergency contact, thinking he was clever. But the bail bondsman finding me wasn't about him at all. It was about the universe's perfect irony. The woman you try to erase is the same woman who becomes the architect of your downfall. And I'd built a damn good case. The end up next. You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.